What are you still doing here? Who are you? What are you still doing here? Thank you to our friendly patrons, Strawbones, Weather4765, Midnight Gemlord, Sean, and Artgoon. And a very big thank you to our $25 patron, Alex Ice Rose. Now, we're having this breakdown / discussion and review of chapter 381 of My Hero Academia. Please remember to leave your own list on the chapter in the comment section down below. Leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, you hit that little notification so you miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do a Patreon down below. Use for as low as $1, $1 for exclusive videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks include the live reaction to this very chapter. Now, let's hop into the review. What's up, guys? Pencil here, and here we are to do a review of chapter 381. Unfortunately, it's not 2. I couldn't borrow that one. But a review of chapter 381 of My Hero Academia, which is known as chapter 381, Darkness. And I'll admit, this chapter, like, you ever been annoyed that you like something? Like, you see that you are genuinely being manipulated, but you can't help that because the manipulation's so good that you just keep getting manipulated and enjoy it anyway. Like, I'm mad that I like this chapter because it has a major issue with it that I really don't like, but it's still a 10 out of 10 chapter. But let's not hype it up anymore. Let's hop right into it. So we open up, and we do get to see that we are currently with the 3 main Shiketsu students. Ironically enough, I feel like was there another one? No, it was Todoroki and Bakugo and Kami and I was about to combine his name, but Kami and Hinasa. So it was that. I don't know why. I know this is the guy, Seiji. He was the one who, turned everyone into meatballs, and like that's where Kaminari pulled out the blicky and really showed off who he was. So I remember him from that. But for some reason, I thought there was another major Shiketsu student that I'm forgetting of. I know there's the Earthquake guy, the guy who looks like Deku, and his friend. I know they're also from Shiketsu, I think. Actually, no, they aren't. They aren't from Shiketsu because they have their own unique hero outfits and they don't have the hat. I don't know where they're from, but I feel like there was another Shiketsu character that I'm forgetting that isn't here, but maybe I'm just making that up in my head. I don't exactly remember, but we do have these main 3, and we get some interesting discussion points between them. We get Kami in her VTuber speak. I can't even do it. BT Dubs. Is that all for one? He has a face now. Yeah. A lot has happened. Speaking of, all for one, why are you still here? Oh, buddy, you're dying. Like legitimately, we're not even kidding. Like, you're straight up dying. You're going to be reduced to a baby at the rate you healed and de-aged yourself, buddy. I think you need to get a move on, buddy. However, with that being the case, we see that's Kami's notice. And I'm not sure if she's sweating or if that's rain. Because it is raining right now. But I'm not sure if it's sweat or rain. Because it looks like it could be either. Then we get to see that Seiji's like, he slaughtered my father. Slaying him would please me immensely. But I won't give in to revenge. I would be dancing in the palm of his hand. I don't know why. I think it's because where did I initially hear that line? It was something, it may have been God of High School, but it may be something else. Dancing in the palm of his hand, like, I don't know, I consistently think of like the Sun Wukong and Buddha stuff, and I always find that so unbelievably hype. So whenever I hear a reference like that, or it may not even be a reference, it may just be a common phrase that I just don't hear all too often, but like dancing in the palm of someone's hand just seems so metal to me, because like it gives me the scale differentiation that reminds me of Journey to the West, but that's obviously like its own thing that doesn't necessarily matter. I do kind of wish that Seiji was on that Mamba mentality, though. Like, yeah, I know. I may be dancing in the palm of his hand, but I'm gonna stab through it. Or something like that. Like, the fact that he's still not willing to do anything to All For One, even though All For One committed, like, such a heinous act, is kind of bonkers, but at the same time, I think he knows, and everyone else here knows, that All For One's a literal walking demigod. He's not, like, Shigaraki levels of literal walking calamity. It's not like All For One can touch the ground and suddenly the ground just ceases to exist. He's not that level, but still, this is the guy who, like, lost to, but still did extreme damage to Prime All Might. This is the guy that had a brawl with, up until recently, really, the strongest character in the verse. Prime All Might is who that was, and All For One did a number to him, and he lived that fight. He survived. So I don't blame him for like being realistic, and everyone else being realistic. You shouldn't be able to beat this guy. This guy should not be able to be stopped or stalled at all. He should literally just be gone. But, gotta have a plot. And we see that with this being the case, Seiji is planning to take up his role as a jailer and hold All For One in this eternal prison of his, even though, unlike the Sky Prison that actually did exist as a prison, they don't necessarily have a prison. He's just an open space. Still very shocked that All For One isn't left yet, but we'll talk about that a bit more later. However, we do get to see that we are getting, or not we saw it, but we do see that the news of Shigaraki and Deku leaving the flying coffin has reached here. And now, with that being the case, the situation has kind of gotten way, way worse. Because, sure, it's good that Midori is there and he's able to combat Shigaraki, but Shigaraki no longer in that cage means that he has free reign to just level everything. Like, he really has no reason to actually sit there and fight Midoriya unless he really, really wants to. At a moment's notice, he could be like, I'm as fast and as strong as Prime All Might. There's no reason for me to stick around here. Deuces, and just dips. Like, legitimately, he could and just start leveling cities. And, like, Midoriya could chase him down and try to fight him, but once again, this is a full quirk Shigaraki. I don't know, like, as much as I like One For All and as confident as I am in Midoriya and the fact that I know he's the main character and I know My Hero won't have a dark ending, I think, still, Shigaraki could do some damage at least before he goes. However, with that being the case, we see that Tokoyami actually flies over to Pixie Bob, and notably we don't get to see the full extent of their interaction, but Pixie Bob smiles, and apparently at the moment they've managed to completely neutralize the Toga Twice epidemic, I suppose. Like, legitimately, they've locked them down for a while, so now everyone else with their ranged attacks can focus on All For One, because before they had to split it. They were being mobbed by a whole bunch of Togas, but it seems like Pixie Bob has gone out of her way to sort of isolate them all in one area, and since Toga's locked down to using Twice as quirk specifically right now, all she can really do is just continue multiplying and keep getting crushed and keep getting destroyed, in comparison to before, where hypothetically, if she was in her base state but was running around in a whole bunch of clones, then maybe she could start whipping out other quirks. But even then, I don't think her repertoire is actually that deep. However, we do get to see that with All For One suddenly facing all these range attacks, and I love the fact that there are literal Twice Togas being thrown at him, like alongside the laser attacks. People are literally throwing Twice clones at him, which is hilarious. But once again, I kind of gotta ask All For One, like, Brody, why are you engaging? Like, in a limited time period, this is a question for y'all. If you were in All For One's exact position, and remember, All For One is legitimately a demigod, like, physically, such an impassable wall in his prime, which is what he is in right now. As far as we know, this is prime All For One. You are a demigod in your prime, and you have multiple ants getting in your way, and you are on a limited lifespan, a limited timer, and you need to get to this other body to make sure that you can continue existing. Tell me, are you guys going to stick around and fight fodder? Like, before, when he didn't have this, and he was just in his old decrepit body that was still extremely powerful, I would get why he would stick around. There was no real rush, really, and in fact, it probably would have benefited him to wait out longer and longer for the other body to take a whole bunch of damage and weaken, so just in case the worst case scenario happened and Shigaraki did reawaken with his personality, then he'd be in a weakened state that hypothetically either an older All For One or now a forced prime All For One could go in and handle. But now that he's on a very limited timer and he already regressed so much, like, we gotta realize Brody was looking like a potato head for a while, like at least 10 years, maybe more. He was a potato head, but he instantly got returned to his prime self. So he's probably at best, if considering this is prime him, say he still has the life force quirk activated, so he doubled his lifespan. Even if he was potato head in the lifespan sense for 40 years, he blew through 40 years in 2 seconds. So realistically, he should be on super limited time, at least from his own perception of things. So him sticking around and fighting fodder doesn't necessarily make sense. The fact that all this fodder can even do anything to, once again, the only guy who could rival Prime All Might in terms of ability, it feels very contrived, if you will. Like, once again, I'm making a whole video on my thoughts about All For One and what he's done to My Hero Academia, and trust me, unfortunately, I need to make some positive MHA videos because I've been talking about it very negatively recently. But unfortunately, it wouldn't be a positive thing that All For One has done. And I think this is even out of character form. Like, notably, we check in with Hawks and we see, Tsukichi is like, oh, wow, you're okay, you're alive. And we see that Hong's like, oh, wow, yeah, thanks, I'm doing good, and thanks for saving the Shiketsu kids. He ended up saving my life. And we realize that Tsukichi was like, in reality, they were actually on their way before I made my request. And I've heard that All for One's body is now rewinding. But with that being the case, we have to hold him here. We have to stall him here. If he gets to the other battlefield and Midoriya gets jumped, it's a GG. This determines the fate of the war. He cannot be allowed to leave this place. And with that being the case, we see that All for One is even admitting to himself that staying here is useless. Because he says, I can only steal a quirk by touching the user's body directly. Afraid to take that risk, only 2 of you attacked me at first. So, All for One is fully admitting that none of these quirks that are being launched at him are actually viable. Like, they just straight up aren't. He cannot take any of them. Ironically enough, considering Toga Twices are being thrown at him, he should be able to steal her quirk, whether it be Transform or Double, as it's currently active right now. But he doesn't do that. I'm not sure why. I mean, maybe he believes the quirk factor wouldn't be stored in all these, like, paltry clones, and thusly he doesn't try it. But he literally, like, knocks one away. So I'm kind of shocked he doesn't absorb their quirk and start doubling himself. But then again, who knows? Maybe that'd be more problems than it's worth. But still, he's admitting that there's no reason to stay here now. He can't get any more quirks. He's already in the midst of rewinding, and he's dealing with fodder at the moment. Like, legitimately, you can see a lot of the attacks sort of just bouncing off of him. Oh, wait, never mind. I mentioned the twice thing. He actually does absorb twice here. Like, or he attempts to absorb the Toga clone. But the Toga clone, I guess, halfway through absorption and halfway through being slammed into him, it literally just breaks against his body. He himself takes no damage, but the Toga clone, and we know Twice's clones are, like, full physical bodies, it just breaks against them. He's literally like a brick wall of human flesh. So the fact that he's still sticking around in such a volatile state doesn't necessarily seem to make sense. We got to realize this guy is, as cowardly as he is pretty smart. He knows when he can't win and knows when doing something would be inefficient and be the best time to make a tactical retreat. We saw that at the end of the war when he took over Shigaraki's body. He straight up said, yeah, this body ain't ready. So, I'm going to be real with y'all. Deuces. I'm going to see y'all in the next time. Whoop, 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 whoop. And he ran off into the sunset. So, the fact that he's sticking around here feels a bit out of character, too, right? Like, maybe if we established All for One as a more, like, upfront, I won't run from anything kind of villain, much more like a muscular or even maybe an overhaul, I'd say, then maybe I think I'd be more fine with this, because obviously he would have a reason to stay. He wouldn't run for anything. But this is a guy who we know will run. And this is a guy who we know established the time limit thing on himself anyway. He knows the full context of the situation. So the fact that he's not leaving feels pretty contrived. Like, that's my one big issue with the chapter. I love everything else about the chapter. I love seeing the Shiketsu kids. I love what happens later on in the chapter. I like Pixie Bob actually being an earthbender that can do something. I like seeing the Toga Twice clones get annihilated. I even liked seeing the displays of All for One's raw power. That's really, really cool, too. But still, the fact that he's here, specifically because we need to have a plot, I feel Horikoshi breaking All for One's character solely for this. Because I just don't think All for One in character would do something this inherently dumb. And, like, the thing is, right, maybe you could argue this isn't inherently dumb, because we see that he goes, you've become so desperate English. You become so desperate to stop me that you're willing to accept that risk. I see. And he lights them all up with this massive explosion. Notably, he, like, spawns out these dark wings, or not even dark, I wouldn't call them wings. Kind of like this skeletal structure from his back, and they all release this, like, a massive orb of... He releases a massive orb of light from his palms, and from these dark orbs, or not even the dark orbs, dark lightning comes from these light orbs that appear at the end of his bone-like wings. But once again, dude, this is not the time. This is not the place. You are literally, once again, dying, being rewound. You do not have the time for this. And notably, I'm not sure, maybe he's, but no, this isn't one for all. Like, hypothetically, if it was one for all and he was using it, like, unrestrictedly and just consistently breaking his bones, I get doing that, because the rewind will then be stalled by the fact that your bones are under constant destruction. Your body is consistently being destroyed, and rewind's too busy trying to fix that instead of wiping you out of existence. But no, these are just regular quirks that he has, so the fact that he's wasting all this energy and time here just for no reason at all seems a little bit strange, seems a little bit out of character. I feel like Horikoshi's kind of dragging it. Like, I think if you're gonna, I say this every single time I talk about All for One, especially now that Shigaraki is in fact back. If you were going to do this with All for One in the first place, you shouldn't have had him. Like, you just shouldn't have, this should not have been a narrative aspect that you included. I think you should have just removed him. Either keep him in jail permanently, get him executed, or something like that. I think having it so that All for One is here is kind of just dragging the story. Because notably, it's not even like, I mean, Endeavor kind of became it, but it's not even like All for One is in the same spot that Bakugo is in, ironically enough, where both don't actually have a main thread villain or main threat opponent or antagonist retrospective to themselves. Like, Uraraka has Toga. As much as I don't like their dynamic and stuff like that, I don't like their characters, they have each other. You have Midoriya and Shigaraki. Obviously, they have each other. You have Dabi and Shoto. They have each other. And obviously, like, Dabi and Endeavor, too. But the thing with All for One is that he's kind of just in limbo. Same thing with Bakugo. Bakugo does not have a League of Villains comparable. He just doesn't. Just like All for One does not have a hero side comparable either. So I legit just don't know why you, like, if I could sit down and ask Corey one thing, I would want to ask him, why did you bring All for One back? Like, not the quirk itself, but like the character. Why did you bring him back with the possession plot? Why did you bring him back with this plot? Like, what are you cooking right now? And like, admittedly, don't get me wrong, I do like what happens at the end of this chapter, and I'm glad the character at the end of this chapter gets to do what they want to do, or gets to do what they can do. But still, I think it would have been more useful against Shigaraki. Like, really show the... I'll save it. I've been going on about All for One not leaving and how I think it's out of character and how I think All for One's dumb and all that for a while now. I'll move on so I don't bore you. But with that being the case, we do get to see that with this massive explosion of light and lightning, a whole bunch of characters get absolutely annihilated. We get to see the Mushroom Girl. We get to see somebody else who I can't make out from the panel. We get to see Hawks himself even straight up acknowledge, we are in big trouble. He's using way more quirks than before, and he was already using a bunch already. Which, once again, I wonder, does that have any effect on the rewind? Like, I'm not sure 100% because we never necessarily got a full, like, concrete explanation of it. Rewind is very inconsistent within the arc it is introduced, so I highly doubt Horikoshi actually has, like, a planned rule set for it. But, like, would that accelerate his, like, decrepitness or, like, his wiping from existence, I suppose? Because notably, the amount of quirks he has would run out eventually. So, like, wouldn't he lose these quirks over time? Like, once again, stalling here seems weird. However, we do get to see that even with the fact that All for One is just once again reminding everyone that he's a literal demigod, the orders are still the same. Those who dodge that last blow, keep attacking. Those focusing on defense, stand strong. He's finally stopped running away. Now's the time to fight. Once again, why he stopped running away is one thing, but yeah, they're right. It is now the time to fight because he's actually engaging with them. However, it is pretty impressive that they were all able to survive that. Like just putting aside any narrative issues I have with it because I think it's inconsistent. Like the fact that they all managed to somehow block this, like, it looks like a Dragon Ball attack. Like, being completely honest with you, it looks like he fired out like a Gallic gun at them and they somehow ate it. Like, that is impressive. People had to have perished during that, right? Like, there's no way he released this, like, building-sized ball of light on top of dark lightning and they all survived. Someone had to go. I know for a fact there's no way they all lived that. However, we do get to see that All for One brings up a point that, once again, I think conflicts with his character. He should be running, but even still, he's like, what makes you think anything will change this time around? You lost the only one who could face me head on. And we see that the one he's referring to, which is interesting, I like that he puts respect on Endeavor's name like this. It's Endeavor, and Endeavor is currently running from Dabi, who is very much crispy. Like, I'm actually shocked he's still alive. He doesn't even have hair. He doesn't have eyes. He doesn't have mouth. Like, I don't think bro can speak anymore. He's just literally on fire. And, like, the weird thing is, Endeavor, I thought you resolved yourself, like, a couple chapters ago. Was it in, like, chapter 374? I remember. It was a short chapter. It was a very short chapter. I remember seeing Endeavor resolve himself here, but he's literally just running from his son. It's just such a meme. Endeavor's trying to get milk, but his son won't let him leave. Like, legitimately, dog. Endeavor, this is kind of embarrassing, Brody. However, that's another thing. I do feel like it's kind of weird. This may be spoiling something that I plan to release later. But I do think it's kind of weird that Horikoshi didn't have Todoroki follow Dabi through the portal. I know it would have been rough, specifically because of where Todoroki was positioned and the fact that he was tired. But like, Dabi was literally frozen. I think you could have made it so that Todoroki chased him through the portal, so Endeavor wouldn't be fighting him alone. Because now it's kind of like a two-stage fight where Shoto's main villain, like, doesn't at least it seems like Shoto's main villain and his final fight won't even be the final fight of Dabi. It'll be Dabi versus Endeavor, which is appropriate, don't get me wrong, but I think it should be a family effort. Obviously, I'm not expecting Horikoshi to bring out, like, Natsuo, Fuyumi, and Rei on the battlefield to, like, meet Toya or anything like that. But if you're gonna have, like, the whole build-up that the family's gonna come back and save Dabi, or come back and, like, deal with Dabi, then realistically, I think you should at least have the two viable combatants, be viable combatants against Dabi. But seemingly not. I'm not sure. Maybe Horikoshi's cooking something with this, and like maybe Todoroki will arrive somewhere later. I think it's kind of necessary. I don't want Todoroki to just be pushed to the sideline within, once again, his own plot. But you never know with Horikoshi. Let's see. We do get to see. Now, All for One keeps monologuing though. He's hitting him with the "This isn't courageous might. This is only because you have not experienced my golden age. Some of you witnessed all mights rise to power, but most of you were born during his period of peace. The era where shadows lurked in every corner, and everyone knew to fear what went bump in the night. Suspicion and blind rage, exploitation and discrimination, a glorious golden darkness filled with chaos." Oh, I actually like that speech. Like, it is kind of a bar. Like, I don't get why he's doing it right now, but it is kind of a bar. Like, I won't lie to you. I've been thinking of a series for a while now where I would, like, voice act a speech in a couple different ways and then talk about what I like about the speech. That is kind of fire. I won't lie to you. That is a little bit bonkers. I do appreciate that. However, with that being the case, he's right. Like, a lot of them have no idea who All for One is. Once again, the guy's over 100 years old. Most of our main cast isn't even 18 yet. I don't even think, are any of them 17? I don't even think any of them are 17 yet. All for One was a figment of the past. All for One's like, All Might is like 50, I'm pretty sure. So 17 years ago, he would have been like 34 or something like that. That's very bad math, but something like that. It would have been a long time. And we know All Might was running around in his heyday right after school, like a few years, if any years, older than our current cast. So yeah, I can definitely understand what All For One's talking about. They have no real fear because they have no real context because they never lived in that world. It's a blessing and a curse, really. And we do get to see that the winds are blowing against All For One. Very impressive, Inasa. Though, admittedly, I still don't care for your character. I'm sorry. I think the introduction in Provisional License just kind of did you dirty. Like, I don't think I'll ever necessarily care for this character. But for all the Inasa fans out there who do care for this character, I'm happy for you. However, we see as All For One is getting blown back. He's getting blown back by Inasa, and Inasa says, "Nah, we already knew about it. I mean, not about you, but we learned about that period in modern history class. After watching Endeavor and my pal Todoroki, I've decided to root for them. Boiling blood will always triumph over fear." I mean, fear can cause boiling blood. Like, legitimately, I kind of get where Inasa's coming from here. Like, in a way, their knowledge / their ignorance is a massive asset because they have no, like, instinctual fear. Like, I suppose you were to put people who once served under All For One, or even someone like Aoyama who had direct interactions with All For One, you would probably have a little bit more fear and concern, just because they, like, know of his presence personally. Meanwhile, like, a lot of people nowadays don't, like, it's a very important historical event, just like Inasa says, we learned about it in history class, but like, how many people now have direct ties to the Civil War? How many people directly have, like, personal emotional ties to the Revolutionary War? Like, how many people, like, you can go back, the War of 1812, there are definitely major historical events that have infinite ramifications on the world today, but in terms of personal connection and personal fear, there's really nothing there. And while All For One is obviously a lot more recent than any of the wars I mentioned, still, it's a period to where these kids weren't even born. All For One probably wasn't even in the history books, as Inasa implies. So his influence as a monster more so comes from his more recent presence, and there was so little of that because he went into hiding for so long. So I can definitely understand the confidence in Inasa's statement here, even if I do kind of disagree with it. And we see that Hawks looks on to see All For One fighting all the many massive meaty fingers, and notably we see that what Inasa is essentially doing is making a bootleg wind cage. Like, the coffin that was meant to hold Shigaraki was mechanical. It was built out of stuff, and they made it specifically for him because they needed more complex countermeasures to stop his decay. However, for someone like All For One, who seemingly just has like big, large-scale attacks, once again, very Dragon Ball character-esque, they don't necessarily need anything too fancy for him. It's not like you can just level the battlefield by touching it. He's literally flying in midair. So obviously they have a bit more flexibility, and Inasa's wind cage can work. And since he's pretty much in a living, breathing funnel, they can kind of just throw attacks in his general direction, and they'll probably hit him. And even if they don't hit him, even if they're just randomly spraying, like, spraying and praying, then they still should at least graze him. And the main point is to stall. Because once again, All For One shouldn't be sticking around because they don't need to beat him. They just need to outlive him. Because he's literally dying. Like, bro is literally on a timer right now. So there's no need to actually beat him or really get that close or offensive with him. Like, Hawks has no reason to dive in realistically because there's no point. He's literally going to perish of unnatural, admittedly, but unnatural means. And we see, and with that being the case, since they're firing attacks into the wind cage, All For One realizes that the main person that he needs to stop is Inasa. Because if they don't have the wind cage, which I'm shocked can hold him at all. Once again, this is a prime All Might tier being, but able to be held back by Inasa's winds. He realizes if he takes Inasa away, they're pretty much done. Like, he doesn't have to worry about any of their range attacks anymore. And he proceeds to blast away with this Dark Lightning again, absolutely annihilating the cage itself. And we see that everyone's blown back, and the main advantage that they still have is that Toga's still in the air, while Inasa managed to avoid the attack. However, notably, we do get to see Inasa does get a bolt to the face. Or maybe not. I don't think these are lightning bolts, actually. I think these are the same, like, dark, metallic, weird tentacles that he has. And we see that despite getting struck in the face, Inasa proves his grit and his worth by flat out stating that, "Roger, my quirk is even stronger on windy days. Instead of your so-called glorious past, I'd rather see a future built by the people I'm rooting for." And I do respect that, right? Once again, still a big fan of Inasa's character. I don't think anything Horikoshi is going to pull in these next couple chapters is going to make me a massive fan of Inasa's character. But even still, I can definitely respect the writing that's going into him now and the determination that comes from the ability to keep fighting after literally getting a portion of your face torn off. Who knows? He still has 2 eyes right now, but that could very easily change. And he's probably going to have a massive scar left for the rest of his life just because of that one impact. So I can definitely respect his hustle. And we see that Hawk is like, ugh, Endeavor. Without him, we're kind of in trouble. But in spite of that, Endeavor, with all the people he's inspired and all the work he's done, even if he cannot directly fight All For One here and now, he has still made people who can help fight All For One. We see Hawks compare it to One For All. Sure, All For One and One For All is literally the links and bonds between different people being forced into one area. Not necessarily forced. All For One is definitely forced, but One For All is more by choice. But even still, these links that have been formed have also formed with Endeavor and all that he's done. He has been this central link, this One For All and this All For One that has brought all these people together that are now currently holding off All For One. And we see that with that being the case, All For One is just a little bit confused and a little bit concerned. He's wondering why the light won't ever fade, why there's nothing that will keep these people down, why these people keep on giving each other hope. He's wondering why. Because once again, being the ultimate villain archetype, he probably barely had, I don't think he has any genuine connections, like at all. I don't think him and Dr. Garaki had a genuine connection. Highly doubt that. He obviously doesn't care about any of the Nomos. He doesn't care about Shigaraki. He doesn't care about anything. So obviously he wouldn't necessarily understand the power of bonds and links, despite being inarguably the most bonded and linked character. He's responsible for everything and he has the most powers. So I think it's nice irony that he's the one who doesn't understand the interconnected links of people through their hearts being bound together through the actions of each other, just because he's never opened his heart like that. I think that's nice. However, we do get to see that All For One, even in spite of his confusion and his wondering of why these people are, continuing to be people,
He says, "It's all for naught. You can't come close, fearing that I'll steal your quirks. It's all over. That's what awaits you."
And we see that Brody may have made a mistake or two. Golly gee willikers, fellas. He may have made a miscalculation. A 5, or like 50, or however big this big old beast is.
Because behind him, in the deepest of shadow, 2 bright eyes appear. And notably, I really like this moment, even though it technically doesn't make sense. I mean, maybe it made noise, but there are no SFX on this page, so I'm not sure if it made any noise. But I love the look of All For One as he realizes that something is behind him. Like, he just has this moment of, like, I feel like everyone has experienced this at least once. You're sitting down, you're not doing anything in a public area, but you just feel someone's eyes on you and you look and there is actually someone looking at you. Like, you don't know why. It's not like we have a sixth sense for that or anything like that. It's not like you can feel their eyes boring into you, but you can. It's a weird thing. Like, it's happened to me before a couple of times, and I know I've done it to people on purpose. Like, I've looked at them and been like, mentally willing them, and they will look over and be like, "Dude, what are you staring at before?" I was like, I got you. So I can definitely understand this kind of reaction, especially from a creature so big, right? So, like, even if there is no, like, established power sensing thing in the world, I can understand how a multi-building tall titan would catch All For One's attention. However, I wonder how he broke into the wind cage. Like, was he just in there the whole time? I mean, we do get to see Tokoyami enveloped in the dark shadow, and we see that All For One is getting a feeling that he hasn't felt in a while. This feeling that he needs to dodge this attack at all costs. And we see that, I'm not sure if this is Tokoyami or Dark Shadow speaking. I think it's Tokoyami, because I don't think Dark Shadow is this eloquent. He says, "Even darkness comes in many shades. Nobody crowns you king of the shadows. The darkness you cast tasted like dishwater. I've taken it all." Okay, so yeah, that is Dark Shadow. I think that is very specifically Dark Shadow, because he's in his villain era, if you will. And we see that in spite of him being in his villain era, and despite Tokoyami seemingly struggling to hold him back, this level of power, this way where we see Dark Shadow literally looming over all the opposition, especially All For One, it's beautiful. Because this has kind of been built up throughout the entire series, that if Dark Shadow were to ever really reach its full potential, it could even rival the gods. And we see that apparently the reason Tokoyami can pull something off like this is because dark clouds blocking the sunlight which suddenly appeared allowed me to use my power for a longer period of time. The flames are dying out. Cover. And we see the moment from earlier in the chapter where he talked to Pixie Bob. He's like, "Cover me with earth, please. I'll pile up the darkness." All Might once said, "Even if he in touch..." Oh, wait, no, what? I literally can't read. I'm so sorry. All Might once said, "Even if he touches Endeavor's flames, that isn't enough for him to steal his quirk. That's why I was tasked with supporting Endeavor and Hawks. Dark Shadow full power." So essentially, I was wondering that too, because Endeavor is a very bright hero, but essentially Tokoyami was the backup powerhouse for Endeavor. In case worse came to worse and Endeavor was like put out either by rain or by overexertion, now that Endeavor's been put away, locked down, it allows Tokoyami to use his full power, and Tokoyami's full power is very, very effective, as we can see here. And we see that Hawks demands that he goes for it, because now that he has this opening, there's no reason to not do it. And maybe, hypothetically, it appears that All For One could have dodged, but with Inasa's ability to use wind, he helps drag Black Anth, Balder, into All For One. And I'm not sure how much damage it does. All For One does seem to catch the attack, but it is still very, very impressive that he managed to do that. I like it a lot. I like the big thing. Interestingly enough, when I think Balder, I think of Norse mythology, but when I hear Anth, I think of Egyptian mythology. So, interesting connection there, but that is the end of the chapter. Overall, really, really a W chapter. My only thing is, I feel like All For One's super out of character in this chapter. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would do something like this, but maybe a real All For One fan down below can tell me otherwise. Other than that, I think the chapter's great. We don't get much of Cammy's dumb YouTuber speak, or says me, the dumb YouTuber. But with that being the case, we don't get much of that. We get good motivation for a lot of our characters. We get good moments from characters I don't even like. We get to see All For One be a Dragon Ball character. We get to see Pixie Bob actually doing things. We get to see the wind being powerful. We get to see the connections that All For One doesn't understand that Endeavor has built. We get so much good stuff in this chapter. It's just All For One being a dummy head who I don't think should have been brought back. That kind of soils it for me, but it's still a 10 out of 10 chapter. So I can't really say it spoils it for me that much. However, that's what I think. Please let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Make sure the notifications will miss out on any videos that come to the channel. Also, I do have a page down below. You can result as $1 $1 likes, videos, early content, and more. You also now become a member of the channel for as low as $3 a month to get the same perks and more. Some of those perks include the live reaction to this very chapter. Thank you guys so much for watching once again, and I hope you guys have a wonderful day. This is Dabi with a pencil, writing off.